All right, hi, welcome back. Now we're going to be talking about the strength of your organization's foundation. So what I see a lot of times with especially organizations who have been around for 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years, um, you know, they're in operation, they're doing the work, they might have even received a few grants, but the foundation of the organization is not strong. So what I mean by that is that the best practices that should be in place for a nonprofit organization were never put in place. And it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't because a nonprofit founder was trying to break a rule or didn't care about, what funders expect or what the community expects from a nonprofit. That's not usually the case. Usually the case is that the founder just didn't know. So what I want to talk about today is your foundation for your organization and making sure that it is strong. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the Articles of Incorporation. So I want you to take a look at your Articles of Incorporation and make sure that you have the provisions that are required by the IRS, number one. So you should have a purpose clause, you should have a limitation on activities clause, and a dissolution clause. If you don't see those words, those 3 words, purpose, limitation on activities, and dissolution, it means you don't have it in there. Those 3 clauses are required for 501c3 status. So what usually happens is they're not required by the state. So people apply through the state and they get approved. So they think that nothing is wrong with their articles of incorporation. And then they apply for 501c3 status through the short form application 1023-EZ. The 1023-EZ only asks you, instead of asking you like the long form does for the supplemental materials that go along with the application, like can you attach your bylaws, can you attach your articles? They just say, do you have your articles, yes or no? Yes. Do you have your bylaws and conflict of interest policy? Yes. So if that's what you did when you filled in your 1023-EZ, there's a very good chance that your application was processed by a computer through the IRS instead of someone actually looking at the application, the 1023-EZ. So you might have passed without being in compliance. You don't want that to come back and bite you. So definitely check to see if you have those clauses. If you don't, we have the Nonprofit 101 in the Nonprofit for Newbies shop, which is only like $10. It's extremely affordable, but we go in depth about the structure of a nonprofit organization. This is just me doing a quick crash course, but we have the provisions that you can go and grab. And then we also have a walkthrough in the Learning Academy, as well as a walkthrough of a sample articles of incorporation and 1023-EZ application. So that's there for you. The second thing we're going to talk about is your bank account. I talked about this in the last video. You should have a business bank account. That business bank account should be attached to your nonprofit EIN number, and it should be attached to your nonprofit's bank account. Everything that you spend for your nonprofit should go into your business bank account. So if you go and buy the Nonprofit 101 for $10, you should put that money into the business bank account. And then you go ahead and spend from the business debit card, okay? Now, if you're just starting out and you don't have a bank account, that's just not something that you can do at this moment. Just keep a good record of all of the money that you have spent as the founder or as a board member, and then make the board of directors aware so that, when you do receive funding, you can pay yourself back for that. Well, the organization can pay you back. Or you can write that off on your taxes as a tax deductible donation, one or the other. So that's how you make sure that, the funds are going to the right place. There's no confusion. We also talked about taking your bank statements every month and going through highlighting. This is just a very, if you have very basic, you bought a few courses, you might have paid for your paperwork filing, nothing too crazy. Just go in and look for that information, okay? Make sure you're looking to see what came in and what went out and label it. Keep that information in the binder so that you do not lose that information, okay? The third thing we're going to talk about is your board of directors. You should have a board president, a board treasurer, and a board secretary. Typically with your board, you only want to have, for every 3 people, only one should have a relationship, familial relationship. So that means you shouldn't have your sister, your cousin, and your brother on your board of directors. Typically, you guys should be hosting board meetings. And within those board meetings, you guys should be discussing the decisions, the overall decisions for the organization. So there shouldn't be one person who's making all the decisions and doing all the day-to-day work, signing all the checks. There should be some type of checks and balances. So if you have your CEO, executive director who's out there doing most of the work in the community, and maybe let's say onboarding, paying a stipend for staff members, then that same person should not be signing all of the checks, including their own check if they're paying themselves a stipend. The board treasurer, for example, can get involved and look over every single check that's being distributed. So your board should be active and involved, know what their responsibilities are, and they should be your checks and balances for the decisions that are being made for the organization. I would recommend, as a newly established nonprofit, within the first year, meet at least once a month for 30 minutes to an hour and go over the major, changes for the organization or the major decisions. And if you are a little bit more established, then it's okay to meet quarterly. But you should be meeting, you should be voting on decisions, and you should be keeping good meeting minutes, okay? Within those meeting minutes, you should be keeping track of who was presenting at the board meeting, who was present at the board meeting, what decisions were made, the date, the time, all that good stuff. Again, we do have a board essentials packet. A nonprofit for newbies, honestly, we have everything you need as a newly established founder. So you can buy them one by one. The board essentials, I believe, is $15. It's extremely affordable. We try to make sure that our resources are available for everyone. Or again, you can visit the Learning Academy and everything is $25. It's $25 a month to access those resources, in addition to the weekly workshops and the one-on-one coaching, okay? So your board should be structured correctly. And then your 501c3 application, you want to make sure that you went through the application and checked the right boxes. So if you're not sure, I recommend you have a professional. We can do it, or if you have someone, you built a relationship with someone who has experience with filing 501c3 application, at least it might not be affordable for them to do it for you, but at least complete the application, and before you submit it, have someone look over it. Or if you already did submit it, then at least you know if there's something that needs to be changed. The biggest thing I see is people who register as a private foundation. Typically, everyone who's listening to this, just to clarify, you're a charitable organization here. So that means the majority of your funding is coming from the community. You're receiving grants to fund your nonprofit's mission. So you're not going to have just a few private companies or private individuals funding that organization, okay? It's going to be typically the community that's supporting you, and then you're doing the work in the community. A lot of people, the biggest mistake I see with the 501c3 is that they register as a private foundation, and that private foundation ends up, private foundations are typically grant makers. So instead of them going out into the community and doing the work, they actually give grants to charitable organizations to do the work in the community. So you can apply to be both a private 501c3 foundation or a charitable organization publicly supported on the same application. So it gets really confusing if you're just going through the checklist saying, yep, this applies to me. Yep, okay. So you want to be careful with that. At the very least, just knowing on your determination letter what your status is, and making sure that you're in compliance as far as that, okay? Another thing is the purpose that was listed on your 501c3 application. Your purpose that was listed should be related to what you told the IRS you were going to do. What you told the IRS you were going to do should be related to what you're doing currently. So if you said you're going to be serving the homeless, then you should be serving the homeless. If you said you're going to be serving animals, then you should be helping animals. Try to stick within the purpose that you gave the IRS. And if there are any changes, then you want to consult, with an attorney versed in nonprofit startup, or contact the IRS to verify whether or not the services that you're offering are within the purpose that you've given them, is if it's going to be any problem. Typically, it's going to be if you're receiving revenue outside of what you stated your mission was. So for example, if your nonprofit has a building and you start collecting rental income, that could be typically the issue, because you didn't say that you are a nonprofit, in regards to real estate. So, just be careful there. Another thing I want to mention to you guys is your intake program. So the very final thing we're going to talk about is your intake and evaluation. So every time you serve someone, you should have some type of intake form. It could be information that you collect verbally. It could be something that you have someone apply through an iPad, or they apply on a website before they come to you, or they complete a form. Some type of way to track who you served. So when I say that, where they live, their age, how you help them. So essentially, you're going to collect their demographic information, and you're going to keep track of how you assisted them. So you should be able to say, we served 1,500 individuals through our turkey giveaway. Okay. You should have a clear number of the amount of people you help, because if you start from the very beginning, year one, keeping track of that data, you're going to be more likely to get funding than for an organization who has been in existence for 3 years but can't tell us how many people they've helped, or what their programs have accomplished. So keep very good track of all of your programs' outcomes. That way, when you do come to our grant writers to seek funding, we're able to work with you to show the great things that you've done in the community. Okay, so that is my spiel for today about organization structure. If you guys have any questions about that, you can leave them in the comments.